But the truth is, the meta-narrative about the church in this country around gay people is a very, very, very negative one, which is what we all agree about and understand and know. That's what Steve Holmes said to me. Do you know, the EA, in taking their stance, still acknowledge, beginning and end of what Steve said, that this is the situation. So this won't go away unless we address it. It's no good saying, hey, it's all going really well and let's kind of push the few bad cases into the corner. It's not a few bad cases. Your article, again in Christianity Magazine, addresses just this latest case from that church in Didsbury, who, of course, have sat down, and I think I've looked online at what they're doing. They're going through a whole year process to reevaluate their theology, not just around all the things Ed's talked about, nothing to do with me, but they're going through a whole year's process in the way they look at sexuality. In fact, we've invited them, they are coming, to the open conversation that we're running, just to talk about how an evangelical church faced with a death of one of its young people is forced to say, being quiet about this isn't enough. We have to explicitly talk about this issue, reevaluate where we are, and be clear so that the young girls like Lizzie of the future are not caught in that trap.
And I think we've both highlighted in things we've written and said in the past that the silence is one of the most damaging things. And I think there's organisations across the evangelical spectrum and some very prominent church leaders and some very prominent organisations and churches that have basically embraced an appalling silence on this issue, which is massively to the detriment of evangelicalism generally, but also people in their churches. And you know, that is one of the things that we would both want to share, you know, our concern on.
Even if the way that you would hope that churches would speak into the situation and not be silent is to be upfront about the fact that people are going to be experiencing same-sex attraction in their congregation. Would you like, I mean, one of the things Sean suggests is that he thinks that one way in which churches who do take a traditional stance on this could help is by actually inviting people who have stories like yours, Ed, to come and talk about their experience in a way that I guess, although it doesn't betray their evangelical theology, will at least get the issue out into the open and say, you can talk about this. We're open to having this discussion in this church and so on. Yeah,
I love the fact that, you know, one of the most conservative evangelical churches I know in the country now, whenever this issue comes up in any context, you know, talks about, you know, how welcome people are who are LGBT, and also talks about the sort of support group that one of their ministers is running to help people that experience same-sex attraction, but also is really clear that that support group isn't sort of, let's put them off in a special sort of category of people with really big problems, but is just, you know, something that happens alongside church family life in all its sort of glory and messiness, you know, on a sort of daily, weekly basis and things like that. So I think, we do want people to be talking about it. We do want people to be sharing their experience. And we also do want to be helping people to see that debating this issue and getting clear on all the theological missteps the church has taken across the spectrum, how it's going to strengthen our churches. So actually, if we really start talking about what life is like without sex and how you can live life to the full without sex, that helps me in my church family, but it also helps a number of people who are single for whatever reason, single parents in my church family. It helps the widowed and the widowers. It helps the divorced people in my church family. And the wonderful news is that it is possible to live a very full life without sex. And that seems to be a message the church has lost. In response to the sexual revolution, the danger is we've upped sex within marriage to this sort of thing that's going to solve everything and it brings joy and fullness in a way that's not going to help me and the 50% of the people like me who are single in churches.
I mean, but from your perspective, Steve, you say it's good to have that conversation even in a conservative, church as well. But for you, that doesn't quite go far enough, presumably, because there are going to be people for whom the celibate option isn't an option that works for them in terms of their life.
I think that's the case. I mean, a couple of things I'd say to what Ed said there. I mean, it's wonderful to hear about a conservative evangelical church that is truly embracing LGBT people and not putting them into some special category that need healing or exorcism. But we know that there are many churches around our country that are evangelical that are still involved in those things. And there are different approaches. You know, people say the Bible's really clear. I was talking to a guy just a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, you know how time flies by, who was telling me that he was in a new church, an evangelical church, member of the EA, actually, and they prayed for healing for him, and then they sat him in front of a pornographic video and prayed that he'd be turned on by it.
Blimey, right.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's very far from this, and
Okay.
I trust him. But then, of course, there are churches that there are lots of different views. There's the kind of church that says, we believe the Bible, it's clear what the Bible says, we need, this guy is demonized. There's the kind of church that says, oh no, that's not what the Bible says, but he does need healing. There's the kind of church that says, no, he doesn't even need healing. It's okay to have a homosexual orientation as long as you never do anything about it and you stay celibate. What I'm saying is just those three views being so prominent show you that there's not half as much clarity about the biblical text as people lead you to believe.
Ed.
Well, I mean, I take it that there are churches out there that, still say that I need to be delivered from a demon, or still say that my biggest need is to be sort of healed, or for it to be. I mean, in some ways, I think it would be great if we could begin to name and shame these churches rather than always quote how many there are out there. Because I think actually that's quite important.
Do you know what I've found, Ed, is that I'm really enjoying this conversation. I think it's brilliant because I think the way you talk about this, it's fantastic. But people have got angry with me for naming things, and I don't want to name people because I don't think that helps. But if it's your idea, perhaps Living Out could compile a list of churches that it thinks are just making life tough for gay people.
Yeah, well, and I think
I've got some names I can contribute to your.
But I mean, and I think, and as we've agreed in the past, the biggest thing is the silence, and I think we could certainly both name and shame churches that are just their sort of official policy seems to be to say nothing on this issue at all.
Because they might be conservative in private, but they're not willing to kind of say that out loud because they're
or the
opposite one.
Yeah. And actually, I think both stances are just display a lack of courage.
Okay.
And actually, both stances display a huge lack of love for people in their church families.
Yeah, and respect.
That actually they're not willing to. If you're a church pastor, your fundamental job is to pastor and help the people in your congregation become more and more like Jesus. And if you're not able to do that, if they're same-sex attracted...
Let me throw one out there. There was a news story a little while back about Hillsong Church, who were asked, I think, in a press conference or something along those lines about what their stance was on sexuality and so on. And the pastor, in this case being interviewed, said something along the lines of, we don't talk about it in public. We only deal with that on a private level, one-to-one. We don't make public statements about that stuff because it's just not helpful, kind of thing. They got a lot of criticism for that. For some evangelical Christians saying you need to be, out there and upfront about your policy on homosexuality and so on. And as far as I understand it, they do hold to a traditional understanding of sexuality, but they say it's not helpful to kind of do that in public. We'll address individual cases because everyone's an individual in a pastoral situation, sort of thing. What do you make of that kind of approach, Ed? Is that a good thing, or do you think churches should be kind of, saying where they stand in public?
Well, at one level, you can sympathise, can't you? Because as soon as you say, I believe, the traditional understanding of the Bible, that the label that's thrown at you immediately in an unhelpful way is the homophobia one. And obviously, we've got to work with, we've got to be careful in how we use that word. There is Stonewall's got a helpful definition of that word, which I don't think sits with a church setting out a biblical viewpoint. But immediately that is thrown, and people fear, all the things that could come from being labelled as homophobic. So if we can, as we go, agree not to sort of immediately throw the homophobic label at churches that articulate the Orthodox Christian view, that would help. But otherwise, I don't understand it, because Hillsong will have people who are same-sex attracted in their church family, and I don't think they'll be sitting there in silence, and what will encourage them out of their silence is people at the front preaching into this issue, and people at the front saying that this is an issue that they struggle with themselves.
Right. Yeah, so you would encourage them to do more public talking about the issue.
To say that it's all done in private means that, again, it reinforces
that you've got something to hide.
Yeah, and it's the shame culture thing. When I think, I can remember being so helped by somebody who at a Christian conference referred to people like me who experienced same-sex attraction but sticking to what the Bible as the heroes of the faith. And it was just a one little line in the talk, but it sort of kept me going for about 2 years. But, just acknowledged us in public. When we don't acknowledge it in public, all you're doing is making people feel as if they should be ashamed of it.
Tune in to Unbelievable with Justin Brierley every Saturday at 2:30, only on Premier Christian Radio, where faith comes to life.